Now, the thing that I was thinking about here is I made a post actually over the weekend that got a little bit of drama around it. And the post was about how me, not everyone in the whole wide world relates to goals. And the thing that I ultimately shared was that any goal that me, have not achieved is because I lacked either patience or I lacked courage. And what that got me thinking about is relationships. And when you think about relationships, you guys, we typically only think of relationships as if they exist between two people. So when I ask you about, hey, how are your relationships? You're probably going to share with me things about like your spouse, your kids, the people on your team, your family, whatever. And yet what that post did is it kind of led me to go out and search the definition of a relationship, because I think that one of the reasons that many of us don't accomplish our goals is because of the relationship we have to them. So I found this definition that I absolutely love. I'm going to pull this up so everyone can see it. And here's what it says. A relationship is the way in which two or more concepts, objects, or people are connected. It is the state of being connected. A relationship is the way in which two or more concepts, objects, or people are connected. It is the state of being connected. So what I want you to understand is that when we say, how are your relationships, anything that you are connected to in a positive or a negative way, you have a relationship with it. Okay. So what that got me thinking about was, well, what are the most important relationships? What are the most important relationships that we can have? And these are what I ultimately came up with. So the first one, if this is a staircase, one building on the other, is the relationship that I have to myself. So think of this like your identity, because the relationship or the way that you define yourself, you will never, ever consistently outperform the opinion you have of yourself. The story you tell about yourself, to yourself, by yourself, absolutely unequivocally matters, and it will garner all other relationships and performance in all areas of your life. So my favorite all-time quote around this is that the strongest need in any human being is to remain consistent with how we define ourselves. Now, the cool thing is about being human is that you get to define yourself. No one else gets to define you. That's your job. That's your responsibility. So just as when I share with people, you are the appraiser of your worth. You're the one that gets to determine if you had a form to fill out on the worthiness of you. You're the one that gets to determine that. You get to determine your identity. You get to determine the relationship that you have with yourself, no one else. And if you're blaming others for the relationship you have with yourself, you are wasting your time, because blame is the transference of pain, but with it, you transfer power and responsibility. The second thing is the relationship that you have to your decisions. Here's the challenge with decisions. See, you've got this amazing brain, and what your brain wants to do is conserve energy. So it takes patterns or it takes processes and it starts to automate them. We call this habits or habitual thinking and decision making. And so when you look at how you make decisions, 95% of the time that's done under the level of your consciousness. You don't even know that you're doing it. And yet the difference that makes the difference, if you've gotten no other message this year out of Monday Morning Mojo, the difference that makes the difference between where people are and where they ultimately end up are their decisions. Now understand there's a difference between decisions and choices, okay? So the way I like to think about this is choices are options, decision is selection. So if I go 2 blocks west of here, one of my favorite restaurants is this brewery. It's called Free State Brewery. And when I go in there, I can look at the menu of, food options. And there are things like salads and hummus and, these bowls that are really nutritious. And then they have like burgers and pork frittered fried pieces of shit and like all kinds of nastiness, right? So those are my options off of that menu. What I ultimately select is my decision. So I want you to get really clear about the relationship you have to your decisions. Do you see the cause and effect? Do you see the way that you make this decision and you end up with this effect? Okay. So the relationship that you have to your decisions ultimately matters. Then secondly, your goals. Now, the thing about goals is I also want you to think about this as like the things that you want. And one of my all-time favorite heroes is a guy named Peter Crone. And Peter Crone is the mind architect. The thing that he shared that I heard recently was, you are the energy you want from. You are the energy you want from. What does that mean? Well, when you look at your goals, you're only going to approach your goals from one of two energies. One is abundance and one is absent. So if you're looking at something and you say, I want to get that thing, but the energy you have around it is that it is currently absent from you. It is the energy of lack and scarcity. That energy will govern all your actions. And even if you get it, you will not get the payoff that you're hoping that you will get. The other one is the energy of abundance, meaning I already possess this thing. If you've ever read the book, The Strangest Secret, which along with Think and Grow Rich, those two books should be required reading of anyone before they graduate high school. What you'll find is that the strangest secret is ultimately that you become what you think about all day long. And so if you become what you think about all day long and all the energy around your goals, the relationship you have around your goals is lack and scarcity and what I call the if, when, or when I, then I patterns, meaning when I have that, then I'll feel this. Then you're ultimately going to end up with whatever you started with, and it's not going to give you the payoff that you want. You're going to find that your energy really lacks around that. So with your goals, you've got to choose wisely, and yet start with energy abundance. Practice, drill, and rehearse as if that thing had already occurred. And then that's what we call the energy of manifestation. Lastly, your people. What's the relationship that you have to your people? And you've heard me say this ad nauseum, the longest running study on human behavior has shown that what makes us happy, unequivocally makes us happy, is a deep interpersonal relationship with our tribe. Longevity and vitality are directly connected to the quality of relationships of those around you. So what is the relationship that you have to your people? So what I want you to really get is that all of these have relationship statuses. So when you look at the relationship you have yourself, your decisions, your goals, your people, so which status do you have? For some of you, it's the one that's checked here. You've already ordered 37 cats. But I want you to think of this like, here's the great question. Think of some of the best relationships that you have in your life. How were they formed? What was the process? Because that process can be used in any of these four. What are some of the best, richest relationships you have in your life? And what was the process that you created, that you followed to build and maintain those relationships? And the last thing that I want you to see is if you've ever attended My Free Life, you've seen this graph. And what you'll see here is, number one, your results are created by your actions. Actions are created by your feelings. Feelings are created by thoughts. Thoughts are created by programming. Now, when we look at programming, there's two types, nature and nurture. The difference is nature is what you were born with. Nurture is what you learned. So for example, nature programming, I was born left-handed. I didn't teach myself that. It was just something that I was born with. But see, when you look at nurture programming, the stuff that we learned, then there's two different types of that, conscious and unconscious. Conscious is the shit that you chose. I chose this belief. I chose this habit. I chose this relationship. Unconscious is I did not choose, which means I picked it up through osmosis from my environment. And the thing that I have seen, the greatest discovery of my coaching career, is that most people, whether we're talking about beliefs, habits, or relationships, most of them were formed through unconscious nurture programming. And that is the thing that is running the ship, and you're not even aware of it. It's a blind spot. And so what I would invite all of you to do is to start, when you look at these relationships and the statuses of those relationships, the way that you relate to them, did you choose these? Or did you pick them up unconsciously? So a true life by design is one where you design three things: beliefs, habits, relationships. If you're not designing that shit, you don't have a life by design. You have a life by default.